The illusion of control there is a quiet tragedy playing out in modern life. It doesn't look like failure. It looks like success. A young professional wakes up before sunrise, cold shower, productivity podcast, affirmations whispered into the mirror. A vision board hangs beside the bedcars, luxury apartments, sculpted bodies, smiling faces. Every movement of the day is optimized. Every action is calculated. Every interaction is strategic. They are not lazy. They are not undisciplined. They are obsessed. Obsessed with becoming. Obsessed with winning. Obsessed with manifesting the life they were promised. And yet, something feels wrong. Each goal achieved produces a brief chemical spark, dopamine, applause, validation. But the spark fades faster every time. The raise comes, and it isn't enough. The followers increase, and it still feels empty. The relationship begins, and insecurity quietly poisons it. There is always another level, another milestone, another target. The hunger never ends. Modern culture tells you this is ambition. It tells you to visualize harder, desire bigger, demand more from the universe. It tells you that if you feel anxious, it's because you're not controlling enough, not optimizing enough, not grinding enough. But what if the anxiety is not a sign of weakness? What if it's a signal that something about this pursuit is fundamentally broken? We are living in an era obsessed with control. Control your brand. Control your body. Control your finances. Control your destiny. Algorithms promise predictability. Data promises certainty. Manifestation culture promises that your thoughts alone can bend reality. But beneath this obsession lies a quiet fear. The fear that we are not actually in control at all. And so we compensate. We micromanage outcomes. We obsess over results. We measure our worth in metrics: income, likes, status, influence. We believe that if we can just force the world into alignment with our desires, we will finally feel secure. Yet the more tightly we grip, the more fragile everything becomes. Consider this paradox. The more desperately you try to control how others perceive you, the more anxious you feel in social situations. The more aggressively you try to guarantee success, the more terrified you become of failure. The more attached you are to a specific outcome, the more emotionally unstable you become when reality shifts. Control, when misunderstood, becomes a prison. Psychologists call this the illusion of control, the cognitive bias that convinces us we have influence over outcomes that are largely shaped by variables outside our command. Markets fluctuate. People change their minds. Opportunities appear and disappear without warning. Health shifts. Accidents happen. Timing plays favorites. And yet, we build our emotional stability on these unstable foundations. This is why achievement often produces anxiety instead of peace. Because once you get what you want, you immediately fear losing it. The house must be maintained. The status must be defended. The image must be protected. Control creates attachment. Attachment creates fear. Fear creates suffering. Somewhere in the background of human history, there has always been another voice, quieter one. A voice that suggests perhaps power does not come from dominating reality, but from understanding your relationship to it. Ancient thinkers observed something unsettling about human nature. We suffer more from our attempts to control the uncontrollable than from external events themselves. Storms pass. Economies collapse and rebuild. Empires rise and fall. But the mind that demands certainty is always restless. Look at modern society through this lens. Entire industries profit from your insecurity. Advertising convinces you that fulfillment is one purchase away. Social media amplifies comparison. Political systems manipulate fear to consolidate power. The more unstable you feel internally, the easier you are to influence externally. A person desperate for outcomes is easy to manipulate. Promise them success, and they will follow. Threaten them with loss, and they will comply. But a person who understands the limits of control becomes dangerous to systems built on fear. Because if you cannot be emotionally controlled through outcomes, you cannot be easily directed. This is where the tension begins. What if the problem isn't that you don't have enough control? What if the problem is that you're trying to control the wrong things? What if peace, success, and influence do not come from tightening your grip on the world, but from shifting your focus inward? There is an ancient idea that suggests a radical inversion of modern thinking. An idea that claims you can't control what happens, but you can control how you respond. That your effort belongs to you, but the result does not. And here lies the unsettling possibility. What if the secret to getting everything you want is wanting differently? Rule number 1, control what you can, release what you can't, is a line dividing your life into two categories. On one side, your thoughts, your choices, your effort, your discipline, your responses. On the other people's opinions, economic shifts, algorithms, timing, luck, aging, death, the past. Most people spend their entire lives obsessing over the second category, and that is why they are exhausted. Anxiety is rarely born from hard work. It is born from misplaced attention. It emerges when the mind fixates on outcomes it cannot guarantee. Will they like me? Will this succeed? Will I fail? Will I lose everything? The imagination races ahead, constructing scenarios that exist entirely outside your control. The ancient Stoics called this the central mistake of human suffering, confusing what belongs to you with what does not. Centuries ago, a former slave named Epictetus taught a deceptively simple principle. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. Your judgment is yours. Your intention is yours. Your effort is yours. But reputation, not yours. Wealth, not entirely yours. The behavior of others, never yours. This idea sounds almost too simple, but its implications are revolutionary. Because once you internalize it, you begin to see how much of modern life is structured to keep you focused on what you cannot control. Social media platforms measure your worth in numbers that depend on other people's reactions. Corporate environments tie your identity to performance metrics shaped by market conditions. News cycles amplify uncertainty, reminding you daily of events far beyond your influence. The result is a population psychologically trained to attach emotional stability to unstable variables. You post, then refresh. You apply, then wait. You invest, then worry. This creates what psychologists call a stress loop. When the brain anticipates an uncertain reward, it enters a heightened state of vigilance. Cortisol rises. Thoughts become repetitive. You replay conversations. You imagine worst-case scenarios. The body remains in tension because the outcome is unresolved. But the outcome was never yours to command. The Stoic solution is not passivity. It is precision. Instead of pouring energy into manipulating results, you redirect it toward mastering effort. You cannot control whether your work is praised, but you can control its quality. You cannot control whether someone stays, but you can control how you show up. You cannot control the market, but you can control your preparation. This shift is subtle but profound. When you focus on outcomes, your sense of worth fluctuates with external events. When you focus on action, your sense of worth stabilizes. Effort becomes its own reward. Integrity becomes internal. And paradoxically, something strange happens. Results improve. Not because the universe bends to your will, but because calm execution outperforms desperate striving. When you are detached from the result, fear loses its leverage over you. You take smarter risks. You think more clearly. You recover faster from setbacks. Your identity no longer fractures with every failure. Consider how power structures exploit attachment to outcomes. Politicians manipulate fear of loss. Corporations manipulate desire for status. Media manipulates outrage for attention. If your peace depends on external events aligning perfectly with your preferences, you are permanently vulnerable. But when you accept that outcomes are not yours to own, manipulation weakens. You still act, you still strive, you still build. But you no longer beg reality to cooperate. This is not indifference. It is sovereignty. The dichotomy of control draws a boundary around your mind and says, "This is mine, my values, my discipline, my character." Everything outside that boundary may shift without warning, but what is inside remains under my authority. And when you truly absorb this, anxiety begins to dissolve, not because life becomes predictable, but because your stability no longer depends on prediction. You prepare instead of panic. You act instead of obsess. You release instead of cling. Control your actions. Release the outcome. It sounds almost anticlimactic, but in a world addicted to controlling everything, choosing to master only what is yours may be the most radical act of all. Rule number 2. Desire less. Attract more. There is a quiet assumption embedded in modern ambition. If you want something badly enough, you will eventually get it, so we amplify desire. We repeat goals obsessively. We visualize success in vivid detail. We turn longing into fuel and convince ourselves that intensity equals inevitability. But there is a hidden psychological cost to excessive desire. The more you crave something, the more you reinforce the belief that you do not have it. And the mind does not distinguish well between wanting and lacking. In fact, the emotional tone of desperate wanting is identical to the emotional tone of scarcity. Scarcity creates tension. Tension distorts behavior. When you desperately want approval, you become less authentic. When you desperately want money, you make impulsive decisions. When you desperately want love, you tolerate what you should walk away from. Craving subtly communicates the fear that without this outcome, you are incomplete, and people can feel that in psychology. This is often described as the difference between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. Scarcity focuses on what is missing. It scans constantly for deficiency. It interprets setbacks as threats to survival. Abundance, by contrast, operates from sufficiency. It acts decisively, but without panic. It pursues without clinging. The Stoics understood something radical about desire. The more tightly you grip external things, the more they control you. If your happiness depends on gaining something, then until you gain it, you are unstable. And once you gain it, you fear losing it. Either way, that peace is postponed. Seneca once warned that fortune behaves like a guest who resents being chased. The more aggressively you pursue status or wealth for emotional validation, the more fragile you become. But when you cultivate inner sufficiency, when you genuinely feel that your worth does not hinge on outcomes, something shifts. You stop radiating lack, and paradoxically, opportunities begin to gravitate towards stability. This is not mysticism. It is psychology. People trust those who are not desperate. Leaders who do not beg for validation appear stronger. Creators who are not obsessed with applause produce more authentic work. In relationships, emotional independence is magnetic because it removes pressure. You are no longer trying to extract something from others. You are offering presence instead. Desire, when excessive, repels because it carries expectation. Expectation creates silent contracts. I will be okay only if this happens. And the world does not sign contracts with individual egos. Stoic detachment does not mean apathy. It means wanting without needing, acting without clinging, appreciating without depending. Imagine pursuing success while being emotionally prepared for its absence. Imagine building wealth while knowing it could disappear tomorrow without destroying your identity. Imagine loving deeply while understanding that loss is part of existence. That mindset is not cold. It is powerful. When you stop demanding that life validates you, you free it from resistance. Your actions become cleaner. Your presence becomes calmer. Your decisions become less distorted by fear, and often, what you once chased begins to move toward you, not because you manipulated reality, but because you removed desperation from the equation. When you stop clinging, life moves toward you. The real question is no longer how badly you want something. The real question is this: are you chasing, or are you aligning? Stop chasing the world. Become someone it cannot ignore. Number 3, become indifferent to praise and criticism. Long before social media quantified approval with numbers, human beings were already addicted to validation. In ancient tribes, survival depended on belonging. Rejection could mean isolation. Isolation could mean death. So the brain evolved to treat social approval as a form of safety. Praise triggered reward circuits. Criticism activated threat responses. Your nervous system still carries this ancient wiring, but in the modern world, that wiring is constantly exploited. Today, approval is no longer limited to a small tribe. It is broadcasted, measured, monetized. Likes, comments, shares, promotions. Public recognition, each one a subtle signal telling you whether you are accepted or dismissed. And most people build their identity on those signals. They adjust their opinions to avoid backlash. They soften their authenticity to gain applause. They perform versions of themselves designed to maximize praise and minimize criticism. Over time, the performance becomes so convincing that they forget who they were before the audience arrived. This is how control operates in sophisticated societies. You don't need chains to enslave someone. You only need their emotional dependency. If praise elevates you and criticism destroys you, then whoever controls the narrative controls you. Media outlets shape public perception. Corporations manage brand images. Social groups enforce conformity through subtle approval and disapproval. The mechanism is ancient, but the scale is unprecedented. A person who fears criticism can be silenced. A person who craves praise can be steered. The Stoics understood this vulnerability deeply. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man in the world at his time, wrote reminders to himself about the emptiness of applause. He recognized that the same crowd praising you today could condemn you tomorrow. Public opinion shifts with emotion, not truth. If your inner stability depends on those fluctuations, you will never stand firmly. Indifference, in this sense, does not mean emotional numbness. It means refusing to anchor your worth to external judgment. It means understanding that praise often reflects projection, and criticism often reveals more about the critic than about you. When someone praises you, they are responding to how you fit into their expectations. When someone criticizes you, they are reacting to how you disrupt those expectations. Neither response fully defines your character, but most people internalize both. They inflate under praise. They shrink under criticism. Their identity expands and contracts depending on who is watching. Emotional independence changes the dynamic. When you are no longer chasing validation, your behavior becomes cleaner. You speak more honestly because you are not negotiating for approval. You create more authentically because you are not calculating applause. You withstand opposition because your self-worth is internally grounded. Ironically, this makes you more influential. People sense when someone is not performing. Calm confidence attracts trust. Authenticity, free from desperation for praise, feels stable. Even criticism loses its sting because it no longer threatens your identity. It simply becomes information. Detachment from praise and criticism is not arrogance. It is clarity. You understand that opinions are unstable currencies. You understand that fame is fickle. You understand that approval can be weaponized. And once you understand that, you reclaim something most people never realize they lost. Your freedom when your emotional state no longer rises and falls with the crowd. Manipulation weakens. Conformity loses its grip. You are free to act from principle instead of performance. In a world addicted to validation, indifference to applause may be the quietest form of rebellion and the strongest foundation of power. Rule number 4. See obstacles as invitations. There is a moment in every ambitious life when reality refuses to cooperate. The promotion goes to someone else. The relationship collapses without warning. The project fails after months of effort. In that moment, something deeper than disappointment surfaces. A quiet voice whispers, "Maybe this isn't meant for you." And most people listen. We are conditioned to interpret obstacles as signs. Signs of inadequacy. Signs of misalignment. Signs that we should retreat. Modern culture romanticizes success, but hides the brutal friction that shapes it. We see outcomes, not the resistance that preceded them. But psychologically, resistance is not evidence of impossibility. It is evidence of growth. The human brain is wired for efficiency. It prefers certainty. It seeks patterns that minimize risk. When difficulty appears, the amygdala interprets it as danger. Discomfort triggers avoidance. We rationalize withdrawal as realism. This is why most people quit when things get hard. Not because they lack potential, but because their nervous system confuses challenge with threat. Yet, history quietly contradicts this instinct. Every meaningful transformation has been born through friction. Muscles strengthen through strain. Minds sharpen through tension. Character is forged through adversity. Without resistance, there is no refinement. The Stoics saw obstacles differently. They believed that external events are neutral. It is our interpretation that defines them. What if the setback is not a barrier, but a filter? Not a punishment, but preparation. Marcus Aurelius wrote about turning impediments into fuel. He observed that fire consumes what is thrown into it and grows stronger. The obstacle becomes the material for expansion, but this requires a shift in identity. If you define yourself by immediate success, obstacles feel like threats to your worth. If you define yourself by growth, obstacles become invitations. Consider a career failure. On the surface, it feels humiliating. But beneath that humiliation lies information, weaknesses exposed, skills untested, assumptions shattered. The obstacle reveals gaps that comfort would have concealed. In relationships, conflict often exposes emotional immaturity. In business, setbacks reveal flawed strategies. In personal ambition, failure forces introspection. The question is not whether obstacles appear. They will. The question is whether you interpret them as evidence that you should stop. As refinement shaping you for greater capacity, most people want the reward without the transformation. They want the success without becoming the type of person capable of sustaining it. But life does not distribute outcomes without adjusting identity. If you were handed everything you desired without resistance, would you be strong enough to hold it? Or would insecurity, impulsiveness, and fragility sabotage it? Obstacles are not interruptions to the path. They are the path. They pressure test your discipline. They expose your ego. They reveal whether your ambition is shallow or resilient. When you begin to see adversity as refinement rather than rejection, your relationship with difficulty changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this shaping me into?" And suddenly, failure loses its finality. The obstacle is no longer blocking your manifestation. It is constructing the foundation required to sustain it, because life does not simply give you what you want. It builds you into someone capable of receiving it. The obstacle isn't in your way. It is the way. Rule number 5. Master your inner dialogue. There is a voice in your head that never stops speaking. It narrates your failures. It predicts your future. It interprets every glance, every delay, every silence, and most people never question it. They assume the voice is truth. But the mind is not a neutral observer. It is a storyteller. And the quality of your life is shaped not only by what happens to you, but by the story you repeatedly tell about what happens. Two people can experience the same setback. One concludes, "This proves I'm not good enough." The other concludes, "This shows me where I need to improve." The external event is identical. The internal narrative is not. And that narrative determines behavior. Cognitive psychology calls this framing. The brain constantly interprets reality through assumptions, beliefs, and prior experiences. When those interpretations are distorted, suffering multiplies. One of the most destructive distortions is catastrophizing, the habit of imagining the worst possible outcome and treating it as inevitable. A minor mistake becomes career-ending. A disagreement becomes abandonment. A delay becomes permanent failure. The brain, wired for survival, exaggerates threats to prepare for danger. But in modern life, this mechanism often We are no longer evading predators. We are navigating emails, deadlines, and social dynamics. Yet the emotional intensity remains the same. And when you consistently rehearse catastrophic narratives, your body responds as if they are real. Stress hormones rise. Confidence shrinks. Risk-taking decreases. Opportunities are avoided not because they are impossible, but because your inner dialogue has already declared defeat. Over time, Belief shapes behavior. Behavior shapes results. Results reinforce belief. This is how internal narratives quietly construct external reality. The Stoics understood that while external events are uncertain, your judgments about them are within your power. They practiced deliberate reflection, examining impressions before accepting them as truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself each morning, anticipating frustration and conflict so he would not be surprised by them. Seneca recommended nightly self-examination, reviewing actions with honesty but without self-condemnation. This was not abstract philosophy. It was mental training. Journaling, in the Stoic sense, was not emotional venting. It was rational calibration. Writing down fears and questioning their validity. Asking, is this within my control? Is this interpretation accurate? What evidence supports this belief? When you externalize thoughts onto paper, they lose some of their emotional intensity. They become objects you can evaluate rather than voices that dominate you. Reframing is not delusion. It is disciplined interpretation. Instead of "this always happens to me," you ask, "What can I learn here?" Instead of "I've ruined everything," you ask, "Is this setback truly permanent?" Instead of "I'm not capable," you ask, "What skill is missing?" Small shifts in language produce massive shifts in identity. Because the truth is this: you don't attract what you want. You attract what you consistently believe. If your internal dialogue reinforces inadequacy, you will unconsciously sabotage opportunity. If it reinforces growth, you will move differently. You will persist longer. You will risk more intelligently. You will recover faster. The battlefield is not the external world. It is interpretation. Master your inner dialogue, and you begin to master your reactions. Master your reactions, and your external circumstances start to change, not magically, but mechanically. The world responds to who you are becoming, and who you are becoming is shaped by the conversations you allow inside your own mind. Rule number 6, practice negative. Visualization. Most people are taught to visualize success. Picture the house, picture the applause, picture the perfect future unfolding exactly as planned. But there is another practice, darker and far more stabilizing. Instead of imagining everything going right, imagine losing what you already have. Imagine waking up without the job you depend on. Imagine the relationship ending. Imagine your health shifting without warning at first. This feels uncomfortable, almost morbid. Why would anyone willingly rehearse loss? Because fear feeds on avoidance. The more you refuse to contemplate losing something, the more power it holds over you. The mind treats unexamined loss as catastrophic. It inflates uncertainty into terror, and that fear quietly controls your behavior. You cling harder. You overreact. You make decisions from panic rather than principle. Negative visualization interrupts that pattern. The Stoics practiced what they called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Not to become pessimistic, but to become prepared. By mentally rehearsing loss, they reduced its shock. They trained their nervous systems to confront impermanence before it arrived. Psychologically, this creates resilience. When you voluntarily imagine losing something, you realize two things. First, that it is possible. Second, that you would survive. The initial wave of fear passes, and what remains is clarity. You begin to appreciate what you have not as something guaranteed, but as something temporary. Gratitude deepens when entitlement dissolves. Instead of assuming your current circumstances are permanent, you see them as fragile gifts. This shifts your emotional baseline. You stop taking people for granted. You stop postponing appreciation. You act with urgency, not desperation. And something else happens. When you are no longer terrified of loss, you stop behaving as if you are constantly defending against it. You become calmer in negotiations, less anxious in relationships, less frantic about outcomes. Fear weakens when faced directly. This calm confidence is subtle but powerful. It is not the loud optimism of forced positivity. It is steadiness born from accepting that everything you value is temporary. Health, wealth, reputation, even life itself are borrowed. And when you truly understand that, clinging softens. You still care. You still strive. But you no longer move from panic. You move from awareness. Opportunities are drawn to stability. People trust those who are not ruled by fear. Leaders who accept uncertainty make clearer decisions than those desperately trying to avoid it. Negative visualization does not make you cynical. It makes you free by rehearsing loss in your mind. You reduce its power in reality. And when fear loosens its grip, your energy changes. You act boldly not because you believe nothing can go wrong, but because you know that even if it does, you will remain standing. Fear what you rehearse. Release what you refuse to face. If this content is different from what you normally find, it's because it's meant to be. Hit like if you want more of this. And if you're new here, subscribe. We don't do surface level. Rule number 7. Act without attachment. There is a dangerous misunderstanding that often follows the idea of detachment. People assume it means passivity. They assume it means lowering ambition. They assume it means not caring. But true detachment is not withdrawal. It is precision. Act fully. Commit deeply. Move decisively. But release the emotional demand that the outcome must unfold according to your expectations. Attachment creates tension, and tension distorts perception. When you are attached to a specific result, every delay feels threatening. Every obstacle feels personal. Your thinking narrows. You become reactive. In business, this leads to impulsive decisions driven by fear of loss. In dating, it leads to neediness that suffocates connection. In creative work, it produces safe, calculated output designed to please rather than to express truth. The attachment whispers, "This must work. This must happen. I cannot afford for this to fail." And that whisper tightens your nervous system. Calm action is different. Calm action is grounded in effort, not outcome. You prepare meticulously. You execute with intensity. But internally, you remain stable whether the result swings in your favor or not. This is not indifference. It is internal sovereignty. A sovereign mind does not beg reality for approval. It participates fully, but it does not collapse if denied. It negotiates without desperation. It creates without clinging. It loves without ownership. Psychologically, this reduces cognitive distortion. When fear of failure dominates, confirmation bias increases. You misinterpret neutral signals as negative. You rush decisions to escape uncertainty. You overcorrect at the slightest resistance. Detachment clears the noise. You see more objectively. You adapt more intelligently. You recover faster because your identity was never fused to the outcome. Take massive action. Build the business. Pursue the relationship. Publish the work. but release the silent contract that says your worth depends on the result. When attachment dissolves, clarity sharpens, and clarity is power, because a calm mind can execute at levels a desperate mind never reaches. Rule number 8, build unshakable. Discipline there is a seductive fantasy embedded in the word manifestation. It suggests that mindset alone bends reality. That belief without structure is enough. It is not without discipline. Intention dissolves into wishful thinking. Discipline is not glamorous. It does not trend. It does not offer instant dopamine. It operates quietly, in repetition, waking up when you don't feel like it, practicing when motivation fades, showing up when applause is absent. But beneath its simplicity lies extraordinary power. Chaos repels clarity. When your habits are inconsistent, your mind becomes unstable. You negotiate with yourself daily. You break small promises repeatedly. Over time, self-trust erodes, and without self-trust, ambition collapses. Neuroscience reveals something important. The brain rewires itself through repetition. Each consistent action strengthens neural pathways. Each completed task reinforces identity. Discipline is not just behavior. It is neurological conditioning. When you consistently act in alignment with your values, your brain begins to see that behavior as who you are. You are no longer trying to become disciplined. You are disciplined. This is the real magnetism. People trust consistency. Opportunities gravitate toward reliability. Markets reward persistence more than bursts of enthusiasm. In relationships, stability outperforms intensity. Discipline reduces internal chaos. And when internal chaos decreases, external decision-making improves. You waste less energy debating yourself. You conserve cognitive resources for strategy rather than self-conflict. The Stoics treated discipline as freedom. By controlling impulses, they freed themselves from slavery to emotion. By mastering routine, they freed themselves from unpredictability within. Restriction, when chosen consciously, creates expansion. If you cannot control your impulses, you cannot sustain success. If you cannot maintain structure, you cannot hold opportunity. Manifestation without discipline is fantasy, but disciplined action, combined with detachment, becomes transformative. You begin to move with quiet certainty, not because you know the future, but because you trust your capacity to meet it. And that trust is built one consistent action at a time. Discipline is not restriction. It is the only true freedom. Rule number 9, accept mortality. Urgency creates power. There is one truth that silently governs every ambition, every fear, every desire you have. You are going to die. Not in an abstract way, not as a distant philosophical concept, but as a biological certainty. Your time is finite. Your opportunities are numbered. Your body is temporary. Most people avoid this thought. They distract themselves with noise, consumption, and endless scrolling. They treat time as if it renews automatically, as if there will always be another year to start, another month to change, another day to say what needs to be said. But mortality does not negotiate. The Stoics did not see this as depressing. They saw it as clarifying. Memento Mori, remember that you will die, was not a threat. It was a lens. When you remember that your existence is temporary, trivial anxieties begin to shrink. Petty arguments lose intensity. The need to impress strangers feels absurd. The fear of embarrassment becomes insignificant. If you had 1 year left, Would you obsess over online criticism? If you had 1 month left, would you postpone your creative work? If you had 1 week left, would you hesitate to express love or conviction? Mortality cuts through illusion. It exposes how much of your hesitation is rooted in the assumption of endless time. Procrastination depends on immortality. So does resentment. So does cowardice, when you truly absorb that your days are limited. Urgency emerges, not frantic urgency, but focused urgency. The kind that sharpens decisions, the kind that compels action. Existential psychologists argue that much of human anxiety stems from avoiding death awareness. We build identities, chase status, and seek control as defenses against impermanence. But ironically, denying death makes us passive. We drift, we delay. We live as if rehearsal never ends. Accepting mortality does the opposite. It forces you to prioritize. It demands that you distinguish between what matters and what merely distracts. It strengthens courage because fear of embarrassment cannot compete with the certainty of extinction. And here lies the paradox. When you accept that you will lose everything eventually, you become less afraid of losing anything temporarily. Opportunities are seized faster. Words are spoken more honestly. Decisions are made with conviction. Mortality awareness does not make life darker. It makes it sharper. Time becomes valuable because it is scarce. Presence deepens because it is fleeting. Action accelerates because delay is exposed as illusion. You cannot control how long you live, but you can control how fully you use the time that is undeniably disappearing. And when you live with that awareness, not in panic, but in clarity, you move differently, with urgency, with precision, with power. Rule number 10. Become the person who doesn't need what they want. There is a final paradox at the center of all power. The things you chase most desperately are often the things that elude you. Respect, wealth, love, influence. The tighter the grip, the further they seem to drift. But something changes when you no longer need them. Not when you stop wanting them. Not when you pretend you don't care. But when your sense of completeness no longer depends on possessing them. This is the ultimate Stoic inversion. Most people believe they must acquire external achievements in order to feel whole. Once I succeed, I'll feel secure. Once I'm admired, I'll feel worthy. Once I have enough money, I'll feel safe. But this logic builds identity on unstable foundations. If you need success to feel valuable, failure destroys you. If you need admiration to feel secure, criticism controls you. If you need wealth to feel safe, loss terrifies you. Need creates dependency. Dependency creates vulnerability. And vulnerability, when rooted in externals, becomes a weakness that the world can exploit. The Stoics proposed something radically different. Cultivate inner sufficiency first. Build discipline so that your self-trust does not rely on motivation. Build detachment so that outcomes do not define your worth. Build emotional independence so that praise and criticism lose their grip. Build awareness of mortality so that urgency replaces hesitation. When these foundations are internalized, something extraordinary happens. You begin to pursue what you want without psychological desperation. You negotiate without fear. You create without clinging. You love without possession. You strive without insecurity. You still desire growth. You still aim high. But you are not trying to fill a void. And that absence of need changes everything. People sense when someone is complete within themselves. It feels stable, grounded, unthreatening. You are no longer extracting validation from others. You are contributing presence. You are no longer chasing outcomes to confirm your identity. You are expressing an identity already formed. Paradoxically, this makes you more capable of receiving what you once chased, because now success enhances you, it does not define you. Wealth expands you, it does not stabilize you. Love deepens you, does not complete you. Manifestation, then, is not about forcing reality to deliver. It is about transforming yourself into someone who can hold what arrives without collapsing under its weight. If you become the type of person who does not need power, you can wield it responsibly. If you become the type of person who does not need attention, you can handle influence wisely. If you become the type of person who does not need approval, you can speak truth freely. This is psychological freedom. You move through the world not as a beggar of outcomes, but as a sovereign participant. You engage fully, but your center remains untouched by fluctuation. And here lies the final truth. When you no longer need something to feel complete, you become capable of receiving it without fear, not because the universe rewards detachment with gifts, but because you have transformed into someone strong enough to hold them. Everything comes to the still mind at the beginning. There was a person chasing everything, chasing success like oxygen, chasing validation like survival, chasing control as if reality was something to be conquered. Every day was tension. Every goal was urgency mixed with fear. Every achievement was followed by the quiet panic of losing it. Movement without stillness. Action without grounding. Desire without peace. Now, imagine that same person years later. They still wake early. They still build. They still strive. But something fundamental has shifted. Their mind is no longer frantic. Their worth is no longer negotiated with the world. Their discipline is steady. Their desires are clean. Their fear of loss has softened. Their urgency comes from mortality, not insecurity. Externally, they may look similar. Internally, they are unrecognizable. This is the difference between force and alignment. Force tries to bend reality through pressure. It demands outcomes. It resists obstacles. It clings to praise. It fears criticism. It moves with aggression fueled by insecurity. Alignment is quieter. Alignment understands the boundary between what can be controlled and what cannot. It acts fully but releases outcomes. It desires without desperation. It prepares for loss and therefore does not panic when it arrives. It builds discipline so identity is stable. It masters inner dialogue so perception does not distort reality. Force exhausts. Alignment sustains. Look closely at the individuals who carry lasting influence. The entrepreneurs who endure market crashes. The leaders who remain composed in crisis. The creators whose work resonates across generations. There is something steady about them. They are not free from ambition. They are free from fragility. Life does not flow toward chaos. It flows toward stability. Opportunities trust clarity. People trust grounded presence. Even adversity respects resilience. When your internal world is unstable, every external shift feels catastrophic. When your internal world is ordered, even disruption becomes manageable. The frantic seeker believes that power comes from controlling everything. The calm Stoic understands that power begins with controlling oneself. One is constantly reacting. The other is deliberately responding. One is manipulated by praise and fear. The other remains centered regardless of fluctuation. One chases the world, the other becomes someone the world cannot easily destabilize. And here is the quiet secret hidden beneath all 10 rules. Everything you've been trying to manifest externally was first a matter of identity internally. Wealth requires discipline. Influence requires emotional independence. Love requires inner sufficiency. Success requires resilience under pressure. The world does not resist you out of cruelty. It simply reflects you. If you are chaotic, it feels chaotic. If you are desperate, it feels withholding. If you are fearful, it feels threatening. But when you become still, truly still, something changes. Stillness is not inactivity. It is psychological composure. It is the ability to stand in uncertainty without collapsing. It is the strength to act without attachment. It is the clarity to let go without bitterness. And in that stillness, decisions sharpen, relationships deepen, opportunities appear less intimidating. Risks feel calculated rather than reckless. Life begins to cooperate, not because you forced it, but because you aligned with it. This is not mystical. It is mechanical. When you master your impulses, you act more intelligently. When you release outcomes, you reduce fear-based mistakes. When you accept mortality, you stop postponing courage. When you discipline yourself, you build trust within and trust within changes. How you move without. The frantic seeker believes the world is an obstacle course to conquer. The still mind realizes it is a field to navigate. One fights the current. The other learns its direction, and in learning its direction, resistance fades. Because when you master yourself, the world no longer resists you,